Apparently, sometime around 11 o'clock this morning, a Texas DPS trooper pulled over a vehicle somewhere in the Harris County area, and somewhere along the way, during what devolved from an ordinary traffic stop, they ended up shooting and nearly killing a 17-year-old who was allegedly armed with a gun. Now, there's a lot of holes in the story, and we're going to go over the press conference and try to pick it apart. So, buckle up. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. One of the things that happens when you answer too many questions for too long, even if they're not great questions or not asked by a skilled interrogator, you can say things that make it obvious that you've made some mistakes, which is the exact reason why I always tell people you shouldn't have a prolonged conversation with law enforcement where you're answering a bunch of questions, because inevitably you're going to say something that makes it look like you've committed a crime or you've done something that you shouldn't have done. So let's take this opportunity to parse out what this Texas DPS trooper said in the press conference in response to questions being asked of him by reporters. Now, I want to make it clear that this is very, very preliminary. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and listen to the press conference, listen to the questions, and then as he goes through and says things that should raise our spidey senses a little bit, I'll be making some comments about what I think is going to happen. Without further ado, let's check out the press conference, and then we'll jump in from time to time and have some conversation about it.
We know at approximately 11 a.m. today, a trooper was conducting routine patrol and then stopped a white Kia Sorento. During that traffic stop, the trooper identified indicators of criminal activity and then had the female driver and male passenger get out of the vehicle. The trooper performed a pat-down on the female. While he was performing a pat-down on the male passenger, felt what he believed to be a pistol. Very soon thereafter, the male began fleeing westbound down Will Clayton Parkway. At some point during that flight, the suspect stops, turns, faces with a furtive movement, and then the trooper begins firing at the suspect. A pistol was recovered at the scene where the suspect fell to the ground. Members of the Texas Highway Patrol began performing first aid on the suspect until EMS arrived. The Texas Rangers are here on scene right now, and they are conducting this investigation, the lead investigative agency here. The suspect was transported to Kingwood Hospital. We do know that the suspect, last time we heard, was conscious and talking, but I don't have any more information on him. With that, I'll open it up to a few questions.
Okay. First things first, the trooper identified indicators of criminal activity. So we understand that under the Terry versus Ohio standard, a standard traffic stop is a Terry stop, essentially. So you got to remember, now if you haven't watched my deep dive videos on Pennsylvania versus Mims or Terry versus Ohio, I'll link them in the end card because they're relevant. I go through an entire 30-minute video explaining that. Terry versus Ohio, you have to have a reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. Criminal activity is afoot. That's the standard. It has to be a particularized suspicion based on articulable facts. It can't just be a hunch, okay? So remember, there are two parts to Terry. Terry has a Terry stop, which is just an investigatory detention based, again, on the reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity. The second part of Terry is a Terry frisk. The Terry frisk requires a reasonable belief by the police officer that the person is armed and dangerous. So there has to be at least some information that would indicate that the person was armed and dangerous before you could actually conduct a pat-down under Terry. Now, it doesn't have to be much, because remember, the defendants in Terry were looking in windows, and Officer McFadden just simply said, well, it looked to me like they were doing a stick-up. People don't usually commit armed robberies without being armed. So just the fact that I thought they were going to rob the place based on what they were doing led me to believe that it would be reasonable to think they were armed. That's really all you need, but you got to be able to be intentional as a police officer about the way that you articulate it, right? But keep in mind that in order to ask a person out of the vehicle under Pennsylvania versus Mims, there doesn't need to be a further criminal violation or any further reasonable suspicion. As long as the initial stop was okay. Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, a police officer, as a precaution for officer safety, can ask a driver out of the vehicle. Now, MIMS does not apply to passengers, but keep this in mind. In the MIMS case, Harry Mims, the defendant in that case, as he got out of the vehicle, the officer noticed a bulge in his coat. And as a result of noticing the bulge in his coat that he thought had the print of a illegal weapon, then he conducted a pat-down. Keep in mind that that pat-down has nothing to do with the decision in MIMS. There were two holdings in MIMS. The first was officers can ask a driver out of the vehicle as a precaution to officer safety and not have any implications on the Fourth Amendment if the person's already stopped pursuant to Terry. That was the first holding, okay? So all it is, it has to be a precaution for officer safety. Through the progeny of the case law that has come after MIMS, there's been no enforcement action by the court, for the most part, that actually holds them to the standard of the officer safety thing. But technically speaking, the court in MIMS said it had to be as a precaution for officer safety. The second holding in MIMS didn't create some new carve-out. It just said that the pat-down was okay because he noticed the bulge in the coat as Mr. Mims got out of the vehicle, and because he noticed the bulge, then he was okay under the Terry versus Ohio standard to do the pat-down. So you got driver out of the car pursuant to MIMS, that's fine. Why is he conducting a pat-down? That's my first question. So I want to know why he was patting somebody down simply because he asked her out of the car pursuant to officer safety, even if it was to conduct a probable cause search of the vehicle. I want to know what information he had that he could couple with whatever indicators he saw of criminal activity that would lead him to believe this person's armed and dangerous. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, why did he get the passenger out? Because you might know, or you may not, that after MIMS, there was another case called Maryland versus Wilson where somebody challenged the fact that a police officer was trying to get a passenger out of the car. And the Supreme Court said, no. As long as they're stopped lawfully, like Terry versus Ohio, if it's reasonable to get the driver out of the car as a precaution for officer safety, it's reasonable to get the passenger out of the car pursuant to officer safety. So, if you get somebody out of the car, let's assume that it's a precaution for officer safety. What I actually think is you probably had a trooper that smelled the odor of marijuana and decided they were going to search the vehicle. So they asked the person out of the car, which would be as a precaution for officer safety, because the court is never going to make a police officer stand there with somebody in the vehicle and try to search the car while they're in the vehicle. That is a precaution for officer safety as far as the courts are concerned. Now, keep in mind, guys, when I say these things, I'm not saying what I think should be the way it is. Not this is what I think is the right thing, or this is my opinion about how things should go. None of that. I'm just saying what I think the court would find in a given scenario. The odor of marijuana in the vehicle does not give you probable cause to search the person. So he's okay to get the driver out of the car, but he can't conduct a pat-down without some information about being armed and dangerous. He's okay to get the passenger out of the car as long as it's anchored to officer safety, but he can't do a pat-down without some information about being armed and dangerous. So that's my concern. He stops this person for a routine traffic stop. He discovers whatever he thinks he needs to conduct this probable cause search, and then he starts patting people down. And in the process of patting this teenager down, he says he feels a gun. Now, maybe he did feel a gun because they're saying that the kid had a gun, but the point is you violated his Fourth Amendment rights more than likely by doing the pat down unless you had information about the gun earlier. There's plenty of times where people who have illegal drugs also have a gun, but that doesn't create a link automatically simply because you smell the odor of marijuana, or you see a bowl, or you see joint, or you see a pack of gummies, or whatever it is that would lead you to believe that there's criminal activity. That doesn't automatically translate over into this person probably has a gun too, right? It's not a reasonable leap. So let's get back to it and watch some more.
What happened to the woman?
It's all part of the ongoing investigation right
I
now.
mean, is she detained? She here?
Yes, yeah. At this point, she's a witness.
And when you say there were signs of criminal activity, can you elaborate on that? Do you believe the car was stolen? Did you see items inside
It was
the vehicle?
drug activity, yeah, indicators of drug activity. And so we, at this point, because this investigation is really just in its infancy, we don't want to get into any further detail than that.
I mean, were they illegal drugs? Or were they like cannabis or cocaine? I mean, what kind of area are we talking about?
Yeah, we're really not wanting to get into that. That's part of the investigation going on right now. So we're just not going to go any farther talking about the type of criminal activity that was there, but we can definitely say it was drug activity.
Are they illegal drugs? Well, yeah. Well, we really don't want to get into whether they were illegal or not. I mean, we don't want to give you guys a heads up that we're out here doing whatever we want, whether or not there's a crime being committed. So let's just pass on that question. Yeah, I mean, it's indicator of drug activity. We don't want to tell you what it was. We don't want to get into the details. I mean, why not? What's the problem? The problem is there are problems. That's the problem. So anyway, let's get back some more.
Does she have a relationship with the
It appeared that they had a relationship. Yes, I don't
like
know.
a couple or?
It's difficult to tell. You know, again, we still have people to interview, and so the information that you're getting right now is just, you know, very, very basic.
So first of all, this is a load of crap. There's another ABC news story out there, which, you know, you'll be able to find it. But essentially, they're interviewing this kid's aunt who got shot, and it was his mother who was the driver of the car. And he actually called his aunt on the phone and said, hey, can you come get me because the police have pulled us over? That's what we actually have. So the idea that he's sitting here saying that he doesn't know what the relationship is, it's difficult to tell, whatever. Let's just explore this for a second, right? We know we have a news story out of the ABC station in that area that is the aunt being interviewed saying, this was my nephew. He was riding in a car with his mother, okay? So just, that's it. Do you think that there's any possibility whatsoever that this guy doesn't know that this lady who was driving this car is the boy's mother who got shot? You don't think that information would have come out prior to this press conference? It's out there. He knows. He's full of it. And this is why nobody trusts these guys, because they lie about stuff that is readily provable and is going to be reported by a competing news station. But they still just, they have such disdain for people asking them questions. It's unbelievable.
Basic.
What was the probable cause for him to stop?
It was a traffic stop, and so that's part of this ongoing investigation right
So,
now.
like, was he speeding? Was he had the tail light out? I mean, what was the impetus for him to do that?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
So you're saying when he was patting down, he felt the gun, and then the guy took off?
Yes.
Or, okay. How old was the suspect?
I don't have that information right now. I know it's been reported 17, but we're not confirming that just yet.
The suspect's body was, where was he hit?
He was hit in the abdominal and upper part of the body.
Do you know how many times?
I don't know how many times. I do know that he was shot.
But
Is
no.
there a standard operating procedure whenever a trooper is going to conduct a pat down? Are they supposed to ask the person they're patting down if they have any weapons on them? Is that part of the procedure, or is there a procedure?
It really depends on the trooper as to what's required. Once the trooper identifies indicators of criminal activity, then that person is detained at that point. And then a pat down before a search of the vehicle is conducted is certainly warranted, and we train people to do that.
Okay, there you go. Reporter asks, isn't it pretty much standard operating procedure for a trooper prior to doing a pat down on somebody to ask whether or not they have weapons? The purpose for that in the law enforcement context is because of needles and things that might stick you. So you would typically ask, again, the person doesn't have any requirement to answer, but you would typically ask, you know, is there anything that's going to stick me or poke me? And you guys have watched a bunch of videos, you know that's what they ask, right? So I guarantee you that he asked. However, what I'm concerned about is his further answer of the questions. Oh, so you guys train people that before you do a search of the vehicle that you're going to pat them down. That's true. They do train people to do that. That doesn't mean they have a lawful right to do it. And so whatever they found as a course of the pat down, in my estimation, unless there was something in the investigative process that would lead this trooper to believe that he was armed and dangerous, he wouldn't have a right to pat him down simply because he plans to search the car, especially if the search was based on consent. Like if he asked for consent and said, hey, you know, you mind if I look in your car? No, I don't mind. There's no drugs in here. So then what happens is, okay, well, stand up here. I want you to put your hands on the hood of my car here, and I'm going to pat you down. It's not like an option. It's not like you're getting consent. You're technically just coercing them and giving them what you will call a lawful order to put their hands on the car, and then you're going to pat them down. You actually have to have a reason to do that lawfully. And so the way this trooper is making it sound is that this is their routine procedure. That is not in line with the standard under Terry versus Ohio. And I know this because this was my great epiphany in law school. We were taught that every person you got out with, you had them put their hands on the wall, put their hands on the car, whatever you got to do, spread their feet, and you patted them down for officer safety. You can't pat somebody down for officer safety without their consent and without the information that would lead you to believe that they're armed and dangerous. It's illegal. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. That's my concern, and that's why I thought it was important to go through this press conference, because you're going to find out things that will get you to understand that these guys don't do things the way they should do them.
The traffic stop that occurred here appears to be an average traffic stop. There was nothing indicating there was anything different about this traffic stop.
So you say when he turned around, he gestured like he was reaching for something towards the officer, or he went towards the
Yes,
officer?
yeah. It looks like he's got a furtive movement, and immediately afterwards, the trooper begins firing at the suspect, and then we found the pistol there right with the
But
suspect.
he never pulled it out. He never showed it.
That's what we're trying to figure out right now. What we're looking at right now is just a small screen, but the Texas Rangers are going to be looking at that on a much larger screen, right, and determining all of those factors moving forward.
You describe in layman's terms, you said he like put his hand like toward his waist. I mean, sort of, instead of saying a furtive movement, be more.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell, but it looks as he is running, the suspect reaches towards his waistband, and then the trooper fires. But when we talk about a furtive movement, it was obvious that the trooper felt that his life was in danger.
So he never managed to point the gun.
We don't know.
So
That's all part of an ongoing.
it sounds like he just got it like sort of halfway out the waistband, if that, or made his hand. toward the
Honestly,
waistband.
we just to answer your question, we don't know yet. That's the whole reason why we've got multiple Texas Rangers here conducting this investigation.
Was this captured on body cam?
Yes. Yeah.
The trooper by himself when all of this happened?
Right. Yeah. Trooper was alone, which is customary for us.
Are either the male or the female facing any charges at this point?
The male certainly is, and then we're going to determine on the female later on.
What charges would the male face?
Well, he ran from law enforcement at a minimum, which is misdemeanor, and then don't know about the pistol in terms of what charges that may come along with. But I don't want to get ahead of our investigators right now, but there are multiple charges that could be filed, and that's what the investigators are working on.
Was the trooper on administrative leave or desk duty or some other?
Yeah, the trooper will be placed on administrative leave. That is standard operating procedure for us.
Suspect, white male, Hispanic male.
A suspect was a black male.
Okay, so now we get to the furtive movements, and this is going to be like any sort of sudden thing. It's a buzzword that the police always use. They use it as an excuse for everything, just like they use officer safety as an excuse for everything. Not because they actually feel like their safety's in jeopardy. It's because somewhere along the way, somebody has taught them to say for officer safety, or to do things for officer safety, or to say buzz phrases like furtive movements, which is amazing because buzzwords like reasonable articulable suspicion of criminal activity is completely lost on them. The things they know are, I got a call, I'm conducting an investigation, where's your ID, I need to run you for I need you to step out of the vehicle, Pennsylvania versus Mims, furtive movements. They know the things to say, but they don't really understand anything beyond the words. They don't understand at any sort of depth whatsoever how any of that works. In closing, my prediction is that when the body cam comes out, this is going to look a lot different than the Texas DPS is leading people to believe. I might be wrong, and this is preliminary. The kid could have actually turned towards the police officer and started to draw a gun. I don't know. I don't know anything about it other than what this trooper said in the press conference. But what he said in the press conference leads me to believe that the Texas DPS doesn't have a good handle on constitutional framework of how this stuff is supposed to work, which tells me that there's going to be some Fourth Amendment violations and some holes. Now, again, I might be wrong. But when the body cam comes out, I'm going to drop it and we'll do a proper examination of what actually happened in this case. And I'm sure there's going to be a lawsuit incoming. So that's all for this one. I just wanted to put it on your all's radar. Please remember that I've started a new channel called Southern Draw Law Court Cam. Please, if you haven't done so yet, go over to the channel and subscribe. It's free and it'll help me out a lot when I start posting content. If you would like to support the Southern Draw Law channel monetarily, I don't offer any type of memberships, but I will leave my Venmo and PayPal links both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. I'm going to link my Terry versus Ohio and Pennsylvania versus Mims videos in the end card so that if you guys haven't seen those, you'll be able to refer back to them if you want a full breakdown of the case law. But until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.